Shout out The Athletic for this, and this will be Chris Krishner and Tony Jones of The Athletic. They wrote an article called Rudy Gobert to the Hawks, evaluating the Jazz center's fit and the cost of a potential deal. Let's get right into it. The Utah Jazz and Atlanta Hawks have an offseason that needs apparent change. The Atlanta Hawks and Utah Jazz have two things that they share in common. Their defense fucking sucks. And you know, I usually don't cuss on this channel because I know there's people that don't like cussing. I'm a guy who cusses a lot, but on my channel, I try not to cuss. But look at the Atlanta Hawks. They're looking for a true second option to complement Trae Young and improve their 26th ranked defense. As you guys recall, made a video earlier today that they are interested in DeAndre Ayton. Now, can the Utah Jazz and the Atlanta Hawks find trade partners in each other that may include a deal for Rudy Gobert going to the Atlanta Hawks? Now, the beat writers for the Athletics, Chris Krishner for the Atlanta Hawks and Tony Jones of the Utah Jazz, explore that in this article, and I took the information from this article and made it into a video. So let's get right into it. The big question for the Atlanta Hawks is Clint Capella has had a terrific year the year prior, and he's been solid for the past 3 years for them. He's not as good as Rudy Gobert defensively, but he gives the Atlanta Hawks a lot of what Gobert does for way cheaper. So what is the appeal for the Atlanta Hawks? And you could argue this is a question that, look, this team was interested in Ben Simmons, and the organization viewed Ben Simmons and probably views Rudy Gobert as someone who could transform the Atlanta Hawks on the defensive side of the floor. And obviously, we all know the Atlanta Hawks were dreadful. They had the 26th ranked defense last year. And you have to think, Atlanta has one of the best offensive players in Trae Young. And if you try to pair him up with one of the best defensive players, like they were thinking about Ben Simmons, but now they're thinking about Rudy Gobert, you have to think that the Hawks and Jazz agreed to a deal with what would be Rudy Gobert, who's arguably one of the three best defensive players in the league for the past several years. You almost guaranteed to have to at minimum have an average defense with having Rudy Gobert on the team. Plus, Gobert's an excellent finisher around the rim, and he hasn't played with the caliber of passer like Trae Young for a majority of his career. Now, the issue is that Young is on the Supermax contract after making an All-NBA season, and Gobert's on a $200 million plus deal himself. Can you be good enough to build a team around two guys on Supermax contracts? And Gobert is clearly an upgrade over Capella, but he's double the cost. Is Gobert that much of an upgrade for Clint Capella when you're paying him double? Now you have to ask yourself, is Gobert certainly one of the best 25 players in the league? Normally you want as many top 25 players on your roster. And from my perspective, it seems like Gobert is one of the top players out there who could be on a different team next year, and definitely will be. But why does it seem like Utah is willing to engage in these trade conversations centered around Gobert? And there's a multitude of reasons. That's because, first off, they now have Danny Ainge as the president of basketball operation, and he's a guy, he likes wings, tough and hard-nosed wings who can play both sides of the floor. The Utah Jazz love Gobert and everything he's done for the franchise on and off the floor, but the franchise has dramatically changed over the last 18 months from ownership to front office and now coaching staff. So it means this isn't really, Rudy Gobert isn't beloved by the staff anymore, but it isn't a huge chance that Gobert gets traded. Okay, there's a chance they bring him and Donovan Mitchell back and make changes around those two. Those are certainly two things that could happen, but the thing is that the Jazz want to get bigger and better on the perimeter, and Gobert may simply be their best piece to dangle in terms of an upgrade because they've been looking at guys like OG Anunoby. So when you think about this, what would a deal have to include? Because Gobert is one of the best players in the league, and it would make the Hawks better defensively, which is something that they need to improve on. Imagine the Jazz would want DeAndre Hunter in this deal. Utah's perimeter defense was rough, just like Atlanta's was, and Hunter has the potential to be solid on that end of the floor. And I personally think Hunter, a year and a half ago, broke out, and this past season he was kind of disappointing. He had some games where he was that lockdown defender, but then there was other where he was fleeting. He couldn't grab a rebound. He's a terrible rebounder. And I think the Hawks would like to keep Hunter, in my opinion, and see what a healthy offseason would do, especially that at the start at 2020, like I said before, he tore the meniscus twice and tore a tendon in his wrist. He looked special, averaging 17 points a game. People forget about that. Now, a package of Clint Capella, Bogdanovic would work money-wise, but the Hawks would have to throw a few picks. This year's pick, the Charlotte pick they acquired in the Cam Reddish deal, and possibly another one could work. I'm sure the Jazz would want a younger player in this deal, but this could be something that they start with. Would this be something that they want? Maybe, because at the same time, the Hawks don't have a take for Capella, and the Jazz have to take him in the deal. I would imagine the Jazz asking for multiple picks, even multiple first-round picks, because Clint Capella kind of had a bad season. And you could also see that from Utah's perspective, getting DeAndre Hunter and instead of Clint Capella and Bogdan Bogdanovic, a deal of DeAndre Hunter and John Collins would make them bigger, more versatile, and better on the perimeter. But I bet you that's not a deal that the Hawks want to make, okay? So if the Hawks trade Hunter, they would have 0 players on the roster who have the potential to be better than good defensively on the perimeter, and that's a problem. They don't want that. You don't want to be putting out Kevin Knox, Jalen Johnson out there and know what exactly they do. So you have to think about this, okay? What's the best deal? Clint Capella, Bogdan, and 3 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert, or John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, and a first-round pick, 1 first-round pick for Rudy Gobert? Because obviously the second deal is way better for the Jazz. First deal is better for the Hawks. And now you have to look at this. What do you think of the Jazz including Bojan Bogdanovic and something like a DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, Danilo Gallinari for Rudy Gobert and Bojan Bogdanovic? I think if you put Bojan Bogdanovic in the deal, you'd have to have Collins and Hunter in there. And Gallinari is a good piece because he's on an expiring deal that would replace Bojan Bogdanovic's expiring deal. And they could really just shed Gallinari's contract if they wanted and only have to pay him $5 million. But the durability with John Collins and DeAndre Hunter is a concern. A first-round pick would still have to be on the table. And arguably, some people will say Jalen Johnson might have to be on the table. And it sounds like a lot, but simply put, Bojan Bogdanovic and Rudy Gobert make Atlanta better. Instantly, Bojan Bogdanovic is a walking 18, 20 points and doesn't really need that many touches. And you know what Rudy Gobert does. So the risk is Bojan Bogdanovic peak level and he's starting to decline because he's solidly into his 30s. And where's the clip? Can the Atlanta Hawks get another prime year from him? Is Rudy Gobert playing as well as ever, but the back end of his contract is so ugly? So are you fine with that concern? And specifically when you look at this, a Bogdanovic-Gallinari swap looks like a win for the Hawks. I agree. It's a 1-year deal, but the Bogdanovic is a better player. He's a quality, much-needed depth at the wing position. As far as Gobert, his contract is a little concerning. It's hard to build a roster when you have 2 big contracts with Rudy Gobert or Trae Young on the deal. They could do something like Bogdanovic, Bogdan Bogdanovic for Jeremy Grant and have something like Young, Kevin Huerter, Bojan Bogdanovic, Jeremy Grant, and Rudy Gobert. Is that a title team? Not really, not in my opinion. Maybe they call and try to acquire Malcolm Brogdon and run Young, Brogdon, Bojan, Grant, and Rudy Gobert. And that's a wild team that would take a lot of picks. But there's no doubt acquiring Gobert limits how the Hawks can build the roster. But it would be fascinating to see. I really think DeAndre Ayton's the better deal.